What's up, everybody? I'm Thrash Maniac HD here, and I announced this when I did my NXT review the other day, but I announced that I'm going to be doing some Versus episodes. So this is the first episode of my new YouTube series here called Versus, where I debate with myself about who is better or what is better between two different things. And like I said, the first one I was going to do was heavy metal related. And for this episode of Versus, this is a very tough one. And this is, to anybody out there who knows who these two are in the world of heavy metal, good for you. If you don't, you're going to learn something about heavy metal from these two particular individuals in the world of heavy metal. This is the battle between Dave Mustaine from Megadeth and Chuck Schuldiner of Death, which is funny with their names because it has death in it, so yeah. But how I've decided to do this, I've split it into different categories. I got rhythm guitar, lead guitar / solos, vocals, songwriting, lyrics, and overall impact, legacy, influence. So yeah, those are the 6 categories I've decided to split this up into. So yeah, and to those out there who are big into heavy metal YouTubers, if you guys are wondering if I'm ripping this series off of that YouTuber Maiden Slave, I just took it because it's a good idea, and honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of Maiden Slave because, I don't need to get into that, but I think Maiden Slave's a little bit overrated, but not completely overrated. I just kind of think that he kind of is a little bit too critical with some of the things he says on album reviews, but anyways, here it is, Dave Mustaine versus Chuck Schuldiner. Starting off with rhythm guitar. Now, this is one of those tough ones to pick because both Dave Mustaine and Chuck Schuldiner are masters of rhythm guitar. And also, before I continue, it doesn't have anything to do with the bands, it's the individuals in the bands, so just to clarify. But both guys on rhythm guitar it's tough to pinpoint who's better out of the two when it comes to rhythm guitar, because they both come up with great riffs and song structures within the guitar sound. So, but I would have to give this one by a hair to Dave Mustaine because his rhythm guitar abilities are about as complicated as a lead player. Not to say Chuck Schuldner's isn't the same way, but Dave Mustaine did it first before Chuck. And sometimes you have to go with who came first in a certain topic. So for this, only because he did it first, but I'm going with Dave Mustaine when it comes to rhythm guitar. Now, lead guitar and solos, this is one of the easier ones because Dave Mustaine, when it comes to lead guitar, when he was in Metallica in the early 80s, up until before Kill 'Em All came out, he was a master of lead guitar. He's still a master of lead guitar, but I have to give this one to Chuck Schuldiner because Dave Mustaine, throughout his history in Megadeth, he always would find somebody who was just as good or maybe even a little better than him on guitar and have him shine as playing solos and stuff like that and playing lead guitar. So he would step down from being a lead player all the time and be more half and half lead, half rhythm. Which, I respect Dave Mustaine for that because he's one of the most respectable musicians in the world of hard rock, heavy metal music. Chuck Schuldiner was always like the star of the band. Not to say Dave Mustaine's not the star of Megadeth, but in Death it was always and will always be about Chuck Schuldiner. And his guitar, his lead guitar solos are some of the greatest guitar solos you would ever hear in music, period. I always said this about Chuck Schuldiner, that he's like the Eddie Van Halen of death metal. because he does the finger tapping solos. If you haven't listened to a guitar solo from Chuck Schuldiner, I highly recommend checking out the song by Death called Spiritual Healing. And if you want to just hear the solo, skip to about the halfway point, and you'll hear the finger tapping solos and then the solos that come after that. It's just absolutely amazing. So, for lead guitar and solos, I have to give this one to Chuck Schuldiner. Now, vocals. Oh, man. It's not to say Dave Mustaine, he's a very good singer, Dave Mustaine, and, like, singing, sometimes he'll go high. I think the best album Dave Mustaine ever did when it came to singing songs was Rust in Peace, because his voice was all over the place. He either did highs or lows, whatever else. I mean, he was a great singer in that album, Rust in Peace. So it is for that, but with Chuck Schuldner's vocals, he was one of the progenitors and one of the pioneers of the death metal, death growl vocals. And to me, that has a bigger impact than any time Dave Mustaine ever sang. So really, for vocals, I have to give this one to Chuck Schuldiner, only because his style of vocals, excuse me, his style of vocals has influenced so many people in the world of death metal, or extreme music in general. So, yeah, so I have to give vocals to Chuck Schuldiner, only for it started a style of music is vocally. So now it is 2-1 Chuck Schuldiner right now in this debate. But now we move on to songwriting, the songwriting portion. And this is another one of those very tough ones, because both guys were the head honchos in writing songs for their respective bands. Dave was always like the main songwriter for Megadeth, and Chuck was always, most of the time, the main songwriter for Death. Now, I know it kind of ties in a little bit with lyrics, but I separated because, to me, the songwriting portion for this is specifically based on the song structure. Riffs, solos, whatever else. And Dave Mustaine's way of writing songs was always very, very well done, no matter what he did. Same can go for Chuck Schuldiner, but for this category, I'm going to give this by a tiny hair to Dave Mustaine, because, again, another one of those cases of he came first in a certain category. So now it's 2-2. Now we move on to lyrics. Now, lyrically, both were both very influential with lyrics. Dave Mustaine was always the kind of guy who would have lyrics that were more political based, like problems with the world and stuff like that. Chuck's lyrics in the first two albums, Scream Bloody Gore and Leprosy for Death, they were more fantasy, gory fantasy based. But then when Spiritual Healing came out in 1990, it was more about society and a little bit of gore still in there. Like examples like the song Living Monstrosity was about drug addiction. The song Altering the Future was about abortion. And like the song Spiritual Healing about like corruption of religion and stuff like that. So yeah, it's like that album had a lot of different lyrics, but then starting from Human up until the last Death album, Sound of Perseverance, it was more about lyrics about life in general. So while the political lyrics from Mustaine were legendary, I kind of have to give this one by a narrow hair to Chuck Schuldiner, because his lyrics were more about life in general, and at least in the second half of Death's career, which was the 90s, which most started, well, I don't know what I'm saying. Spiritual Healing had like the social commentary, society style lyrics, but I am so messed up right now. Human until Sound of Perseverance, it was always about life in general. and the first two albums from Death were more gore, fantasy-based. All of Megadeth's lyrics from Dave have always been more political, but because Chuck had that tendency of doing lyrics about life in general, I have to give lyrics to Chuck Schuldiner by a hair. So now it's 3-2 Chuck Schuldiner. Now to the last category, which is influence, impact, and legacy. Chuck Schuldner's legacy in the world of extreme metal or heavy metal in general will always live on, because Chuck, when he started Death, in my personal opinion, Death was the first death metal band. They invented death metal. I mean, Possessed coined the term from the song off their album Seven Churches, but it was more just extreme thrash more than anything. Death, when Chuck started it, it was definitely death metal. So Chuck and the band Death were the inventors of death metal, and plus Chuck's the father of death metal, the godfather of death metal. And with his vocal influences among the big 5 bands, or no, 6 bands, big 6 bands who were totally influenced by Death were Cannibal Corpse, Deicide, Morbid Angel, Obituary, Carcass, and Napalm Death. Vocally, those were the bands that, like Chuck, influenced pretty much the most throughout any death metal band's careers, was because of his voice, and also his playing ability in death metal was what really made extreme metal throughout the 90s up till now, some bands going more technical. Like Cannibal Corpse have gone in a technical way since The Bleeding in 1994. They've had some elements of the technical ability. You got like other bands who take what Chuck did and turn it into their own sound. So when it comes to playing ability and stuff like that for an influence, Chuck has definitely influenced a lot of extreme metal bands. But Dave Mustaine's legacy, he's the father of thrash metal. And without Dave Mustaine, there is no Metallica or thrash metal in general. Because Dave had that way of starting out playing fast on guitar, and he was one of those, like, guitar players, and also Chuck's the same way too. Both guys, when it comes to guitar, have a little bit of jazz fusion influence as far as like technical ability and stuff like that. Chuck's was more apparent than Dave when it came to like jazzy kind of guitar playing at times. But without Dave Mustaine, like I said, no Metallica, no thrash metal, and definitely no death metal, because death metal came out of the roots of like thrash and black metal and hardcore. So for legacy, influence, and impact, I give this one to Dave Mustaine. So now it's 3-3 between the two. If I had to pick a clear-cut winner to break the tie, oh boy, I don't know. It's like, you know what? Because again, with the whole legacy part, again, without Dave Mustaine, there is no Metallica or thrash metal or even death metal, black metal, because thrash influenced death metal and black metal. So, based on that a little bit, I'm going to give this one to Dave Mustaine. So, for the first episode of Versus between Dave Mustaine, Chuck Schuldiner, the winner for this episode is Dave Mustaine. So, that does it for this episode of Versus. The next episode will be coming soon, and this time it's going to be wrestling based. And it's going to be, and I'll save the 2 picks for, or the 2 people, or whatever I'll do, for when the episode comes up. So, there you go. But anyways, people, peace out.